Outside Your Spotlight this morning, we're chatting about the United Nations' second International Decade for People of African Descent. To do so, let me welcome Zakiya Uzoma-Wadada, the Executive Chair at the Emancipation Support Committee. Good morning, Zakiya.
Morning.
How are you doing this morning?
I'm fine, and it's always good to be here with you and to be in TTT's studio. It's almost my second home.
Of course, at this point, you might as well get a walk here.
Yeah, I'm telling you.
Now, I understand that the United Nations has declared a second decade for people of African descent. And what does that mean for you as Executive Chair of the Emancipation Support Committee? What sort of opportunities do you see this providing?
Yes, thank you, Raucus, and good morning to your viewers. Now, the first decade, I think, for the most part, did not attract the kind of attention and focus and purpose, particularly from governments, because remember, a UN decision is a decision of governments of the world. Civil society organizations, however, did work really hard to advocate, to bring attention to it, and do whatever they could within their limited resources. One of the major institutions that came out of the decade, however, was the Permanent Forum for People of African Descent, so the United Nations Permanent Forum for People of African Descent, which is really an institution that comprises mainly of civil society organizations within the UN. So that, I think, gave some impetus and courage, and then the conversation began about having a second decade, which was strongly advocated by the forum. So we are happy that they have done it. And of course, the fact that we need to have a second decade suggests that we still have so many issues as African people, 187 years after enslavement, to address. You see? And the focus, as you would see, even though it maintains the same theme, recognition, justice, and development, I think what the first decade brought very clearly to us is this issue of decolonization. You understand? And that it is critical that we have decolonization so that even so that our approach to reparations is going to be better. You see, because we are going to then deal with reparations with a different mindset. You see?
Tell me, when you say decolonization, let's break it down. And what does that mean, especially when we look at what's going on around the world today?
Let me give you an example, and then we talk about it. You see the prison on Charlotte Street? And I'm sorry, on Frederick Street? That is the same exact structure that was used to hold enslaved persons who were caught and put in jail. The same building. Yes? Now, policing came about as a result of masters needing to get their enslaved persons recaptured. So that the concept and understanding of policing was that it was there to assist one group by dealing with a particular group in a particular way. Yes? Now, spaces have energy. So that is how when people go back into like Elmina Castle and so on, they still feel the vibes and the energy of enslaved persons. We still have our people in that space as a prison. You understand? And then we talk about how they are treated, we talk about the conditions and whatever. So that is a space that needs to be decolonized. You follow what it is I'm saying? Because the energy of the space and the attitude of the space, even the attitude of some of our police officers remain the same. Because if they go into what we would call our underserved communities, they have a different approach to how you deal with those persons. And the maybe unfortunate thing, but real thing that we have to look at, in the majority of cases, it's African people we're talking about. You see? And therefore, when we talk about decolonization, we talk about changing those attitudes, those mindsets, those institutions that continue to maintain attitudes that we had, you know, when we things. So, for example, not wanting a child to go to school with his hair natural. You understand? That calls for decolonization, because that attitude of not liking natural African hair comes out of that whole process. You know, how the masters perceived the persons that were being enslaved.
You're talking about changing mindsets, changing the way that
and institutions.
we view each other,
Yes.
so that we can change the institutions.
That's right,
Because the people at
exactly.
the end of the day run the institutions, right?
Exactly,
So if we
yes.
change the way we look at it,
That's
then we
right.
change the way that it's run.
Indeed, indeed.
How long does it take to change mindsets and culture?
I'm telling you, remember we were enslaved for 400 plus years, eh?
Yeah.
So that is embedded deep in the psyche, not only of ourselves, but of those who are our masters. So to change that, it really calls for what it is we are doing now. First of all, having the conversations that have 20, 30 years ago, nobody was sitting down and me having this conversation in public.
True.
You understand? That would have been considered subversive and revolutionary.
Yeah.
But so we are making some progress. We can begin to say it. We can begin to talk it. We can begin to educate people about it.
But when we do that, right?
Yes.
When we have these conversations, I've seen people respond and say,
Yeah.
well, when I was born,
Yes.
slavery was already abolished. So I never was affected by it, and
Yes.
you never were affected by it because
Yes.
when you were born, slavery was already abolished. People say these things.
That's right.
And you're still saying that it's deeply embedded into the way that
right.
we operate, whether or not you were born in that era or not.
Yes.
How does it
you
affect
feel
us?
about yourself as an African within the world space has been defined by somebody else for you. And unless you begin now to go and find your own history, understand yourself pre-enslavement, as a matter of fact, then you are beginning to see, wow, I am a powerful being. I was the first human that was created on the earth. All other life, expressions as human beings came out of Africa. We had empires. We were the first ones who understood. When you get to see and understand that about yourself, then your story changes. And then you respond to the environment in which you are living in a different way. You see? And even, let me say, for example, we have come to a point where materialism, money, and power is what pervades our
Seems to be what
space.
drives society.
It's what drives the society. We are being identified by your material possessions
Yeah.
and so on. That's not African. That's not part of who we are as African
But you
people.
now mention the empires and the kings and all the riches and all that stuff that we would
Yeah,
have
but
had.
that does not mean that we are a materialistic society that only think that the most important thing was money
Okay.
and power. You follow what it is I'm saying? So I'm saying not because all societies have their hierarchies and so on. But the point is that there is this about I am because you are. We care about each other. It is important that we all survive if one of us is not doing well. And we knew about that, within our communities many years ago. But the fact that is being eroded by these Eurocentric values of being, because if you check in the history of Europeans, that was their thing. Conquer, get more money, get more power, get more control. And we've seen it manifested even more so even based on our eyes these days, right? So when our younger ones grow up in a society like that, where they're seeing that's what happened on the top, that's what happened with great people in the world, that's what makes life important, then that's how we are responding.
So then how do you think that the sanctions put on, like for example, by the UK government for us to now have visas, the US government just issued a notice that they're going to be putting a bunch of countries on ban, a bunch of them from Africa, actually. Does that affect that process you're talking about when it comes to decolonization, or is it an opportunity for us to now turn around and say, well, maybe we should be working in the region on ourselves as a region in order to get that strength that we need so we don't depend on those northern superpowers?
Yeah. Yes, we have to do self-repair as a people, most definitely, because as you are saying, we also are suffering. But I do think that we also have to accept and understand that those European countries owe us. They owe us. They have built we want to say empires, but I don't want it to be perceived in the same way that, of course, when I speak of empire, but they have built their wealth, their industry on our labor, free. You understand? And therefore they owe us, and therefore any kind of effort to not be repaying, but rather trying to create more stress and make life more difficult for us is totally unacceptable. You understand? They owe us. And still, as you're saying, yes, even though all of these, restrictions and so on, it does not apply to them. You follow? The restrictions apply to us, but you still have free reign. You could go as you want, come as you want, still feel that you can take what you want. It is still happening even on the continent today, because you recognize the value of the continent. You recognize that there is no progress without it, particularly in the scientific area. All of the things that you need is there. You understand? But let's do it with respect for each other. Let's do it with, let us talk, trade and exchange, and, that's what we know. You understand? I came, and when I was trading, I came and I left all of my, I'm trading by the river, and the person came, took up whatever it is they want, and left what was for me. That's how we traded in the continent, yeah? So if I'm doing curry shares, I will put all curry shares there. You come, you take your curry shares, and you leave, let us say, maybe ore, metal, or whatever. But, I'm just saying that is how we lived.
Yeah.
That trust and honesty, your word meant something. It wasn't always about how I can just find a way to undermine, get the better of you. And that is what our young people are learning,
Tell me about the conversation that's happening this coming Friday.
So on Friday, we are going to launch the second decade for people of African descent. Our featured speaker is Dr. June Suma, who is the chairperson of that same institution I spoke to you about, the Permanent Forum for People, the UN Permanent Forum for People of African Descent. We're going to have the chairperson of the Caribbean Pan-African Network, Dr. Ambassador David Commission, who is the Barbados's ambassador to CARICOM. We'll have our minister, the Honorable Amy Brown, who is going to formally launch the decade. And I'm really happy about that, to have the government actually involved in launching it. And we are hoping that perhaps also indicates some level of responsibility in ensuring that actions are taken, because we have some serious actions that we need to take in Trinidad and Tobago. And then, of course, we have the chair of the National Reparations Commission, Dr. Claudius Fergus, our National Reparations Committee, I should say. And then I myself, I'm going to also do a presentation on what we as a society was able to achieve during the decade.
During the first decade?
Yes.
Are you going to also launch your plans for the second decade?
Yes, well, we are hoping to get that from Dr. Suma.
Okay.
Because, yes, she would have some talk about the projections as to what we want to do for the second decade.
Is this open to the public?
Oh, most definitely. We want as many people to come. We want our students, if they are able, particularly at university level, So, yes, it is open to everyone, because, Rokas, when we look at our society, unfortunately, the most people in prison are African people. If you look at any social challenge, we are the ones who are actually suffering under those things. And yes, some of us have risen and have done well. I call them the Kunta Kintes in the group. But many of us aren't. And our philosophy and understanding, if one of us is not free or one of us is not well, we are all sick. And therefore we have to recognize that there is a significant group in our society that needs help, and therefore, if I have 5 children and one is not doing well, it might need more than the other 4. You see? And we need to get that kind of approach and understanding to governance. That too is decolonization. Understanding how we govern, Yeah.
Well, Zakiya, let me say thank you very much for joining us this morning and sharing your thoughts.
It's always a pleasure.
And I look forward to Friday. I'm sure you have a lot more thoughts that you'd be sharing on Friday. And we look forward to, of course, celebrating the second decade for people of African descent.
Making something happen, doing more work. Pleading for our governments in our region to actually see it as significant and important and part of the reparatory process, and let's start to fix some things.
And I look forward to continuous updates. This is a decade, right? So we have time to be able to sit down and work it out and make sure everybody gets as much education so we can have as much action as possible. Yeah.
have the conversation.
And have the conversations.
Yes.
Ladies and gentlemen,
Thank
Zakiya
you.
Uzoma-Wadada, the Executive Chair of the Emancipation Support Committee, checking in with us this morning as we get ready to launch the United Nations' second International Decade for People of African Descent. It's launching this coming Friday, the 21st of March, at the is it Daga Auditorium?
Yes,
Daga Hall Auditorium at the University of the West Indies St. Augustine campus. Stay tuned for more on the Now Morning Show.